doing, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Feels. My guest today, I've been waiting to talk to this man for a little bit because I've been seeing him around the campfire quite often. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Zachary Post. Zach.
Hello. How you doing?
Thank you so much for being on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all. You know, I've been looking forward to this opportunity, man. It's finally here, so yeah, it's good to be here.
Zach is the owner of Elite Homegrowers Academy. Now, if you want to learn how to grow for yourself, you're going to want to talk to this man, but we're going to get to that in just a second because you have an interesting backstory. Yeah. You got your start in the industry as a trimmer in Las Vegas.
That is correct.
How did you end up in Vegas?
Okay, so born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, around 2005. When was Hurricane Katrina? 2004 or 5, around there, I want to say. Just kind of got a wild hair up my, I was like, man, I felt like St. Louis was boxing me in, for some reason. I just felt like it was more out there to see. And like the true story was I was trying to become a pharmacist, right? And then like the college in Vegas was like they accepted more transfers versus the college in St. Louis. Like if I wanted to transfer from like St. Louis, like say Florissant Valley, like with all my transfer classes to go to St. Louis College of Pharmacy, they only accepted like 5 transfers a year. And it was just like I felt like the odds were kind of stacked against me. So that was really the initial reason why I moved to Las Vegas.
So St. Louis was boxing you in. You moved to Vegas. How do you end up as a trimmer, though?
Okay, yeah. So sorry. So anyway, so long story short, like that was like I became a trimmer in Vegas like toward my the end of my life well, not the end of my life, but like the end of my like when I lived in Vegas. But it was a long story. So I became a mortgage broker, right? But you have to build a book of business first. And so in that gap where I didn't have, like, you didn't get a check until you closed the deal, I needed to moonlight. So I had a friend, that uncle moved from Salinas County in California, had a, operation in Vegas. And it was more like a buddy, like he was my friend and he took me to his uncle's shop and I checked it out and I was like, but this is really cool. And I never thought that, okay, I'll be trimming weed or working in the cannabis industry. It just went legal there. And but it was I just wanted to see it, of course, like anybody wants to see it.
But you got bitten by the bug, didn't you?
Got bit by the bug, man. And it was just an opportunity. He needed trimmers, and I needed extra income. So just to kind of float that gap while I built my book of business. So I did that as moonlight. I was a trimmer, like, just as a part-time job. And so with that, I didn't see the value. I didn't understand the value of like this being a real industry then. It was just like, hey, I need a job making like $13 an hour just to live, part-time money. But then when I was trimming, I could see the beauty of the flower. And I was like, it's something to this here. Let me look a little bit more deeper into this and take it a little bit more serious. And that's when I started studying the plant and like the cultivation side of it. So I eventually worked my way into becoming like a cultivation assistant. And then that's when it all just like, boom, it's like really took off for me, like on that side of it.
Did you have a mentor?
Yeah, I did actually. Jose was my mentor, man. Jose, he worked for the company and he pretty much, I took a liking to him. He took a liking to me earlier on, like when I was trimming and he was cultivating. We just kind of like, we would talk during different times, and he was like kind of like teach me things low key, like, hey, if you ever start growing, you should probably do this. And then I was like, can I start working with you a little bit more? And back then the industry was a little different. It wasn't so like, oh, you have to be, experienced in this before you can come over here. Like they were more open to say, hey, I want to teach you. Yeah, come over whenever you can and, learn. And so I took advantage of as many times I could. Then I started to practice at home. So then that's when I really started to learn. So from working as a trimmer, becoming like a cultivation assistant, it birthed me to say, okay, I'm learning all this stuff at work. I want to see if I can get better on my own. And that's when I did the grow in the garage and the Vegas temperatures of 100. It could get like up to like 120 degrees in my garage, right?
My goodness.
The humidity was super low. So growing in Vegas and growing in Missouri, 2 totally different situations, right? All the stuff that, I had to go through a learning curve when I moved back home when I started growing, just because I was used to growing a certain way. Like we didn't need humidifiers, right? Or we didn't need dehumidifiers in Vegas, but we definitely need them here in Missouri. So
when you moved back to Missouri, is that when you started Elite Homegrowers?
So I started Elite Homegrowers in 2019. So once it became like a thing where the amendments kind of circling around, and I looked at the amendment and I noticed that something that Vegas didn't have was the ability for patients to grow, to home grow. So I looked at it like, well, I've seen the story play out in Las Vegas where they were licensed, like they made everything legal. but patients weren't able to get actual product for 2 years. It was just like, because the build out phase, like the inspections, the buildings, the flower, all that stuff.
Just
it
the
took
time
like,
to get the whole industry up and
rocking
running.
and rolling. So that whole time, it was legal to consume cannabis as a patient, but it was no flower anywhere. So Missouri was like ahead of the curve on that when they allow patients to grow. So I was like, hey, patients are able to grow, but they probably won't know how, just like when I didn't know how. So I was like, well, what we can do, our contribution to this industry would be to teach patients how to grow. And I kind of like just bridge that gap until the dispensaries are able to open and actually have flowers. So that's how that started.
What are some of the different ways that people can grow at home for themselves?
Oh, like different methods?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have just in a tent, or you have people do actually room build outs, but you can do soil. You can do cocoa, which is like a soil-less medium, and DWC, hydroponic.
Cocoa, is that cocoa husk?
Core? Yeah, basically, yeah, they're the husk of a coconut. Yeah,
Okay.
right. So, and we consider that like soil-less medium. Like, it actually can be considered hydroponic, if you will, because it's a soil-less medium. It's not soil. So, so that's another method. I personally grow in cocoa. I like growing in cocoa for some reason. It's just easier for me. But you have organic soil. You have a lot of different ways that people can grow from home. I would say it depends on their budget and like how much dedication they really want to put into it. Because if you choose one way, you have to understand that it may require a little bit more attention than another way. So like organic soil, you may just have to water your plants every 2 to 3 days. When you grow in hydroponic, you have to check your pH every day because it can drift, and so things of that nature. So you have to kind of judge your level of commitment to the hobby, I'll say initially. And then once you figure that out, how much dedication you can do, then you kind of pick your method that best fits your lifestyle,
On your website, you say that people that contract with you, you will spend time in the trenches with them.
Oh, for sure.
How often do you have to go back to a person's grow to help them out?
Whew.
Sounds like a lot.
Often, because it's phases or it's levels of growing. So a beginner, they really will they don't know. So simple things that they may not think to do, or may hit them, they like skip it or something.
What are some common pitfalls?
Not watering too much or not watering enough. Like sometimes they'll say, okay, you water your plants every so often. So I'll instruct them to say, okay, you're using this method of growing, you should water every other day. But then they'll water a small pot with a gallon of water every other day. So but they don't know that they're killing the roots. They're like, hey, my plant's not growing. It's fading out. It looks sick. What's going on? And then I'll get to their house and I'll pick up their pot, and it's heavy as all get out. And I say, and I'll tell the client, I say, hey, come and pick up this pot. And they'll pick it up and say, whoa, this is heavy. So yeah, it's heavy. So you're suffocating your roots. That's why your plant's not growing. And then you have to teach them about dry back. Like you have to let that plant dry back a little bit before you feed it again. And they say, oh, okay. So it's the small adjustments. But that's just one example of thousands of examples where it can be pH. Sometimes people don't understand pH or the value behind pH.
What is pH?
Okay, it's like the balance of your water. So if it's either too acidic or neutral, right? So acidic or neutral, and the other one. Alkaline. Yeah, alkaline. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my bad.
Thank you, Sean.
So when you have that particular situation, so if you don't know that you should pH, or nobody's ever went over that with you, you'll just feed your plants at this high pH or a low pH. Now your plant roots can't consume those nutrients because it's at the wrong pH level in your root zone. So if they can't access that nitrogen or that phosphorus or potassium, they can't. And then so if they can't get it, they'll start to die off because they can't actually they don't have any nutrients. So yeah, so that's why pH is important, because you want to have that sweet spot in the nutrient level, in the pH range where your plant can actually uptake the nutrients. But if you're growing in soil versus cocoa or hydro, that pH level can be different, right? It can be either higher or lower. So if you don't know that, then you can pH wrong and have experienced these problems, these deficiencies or toxicities and things of that nature. But mainly deficiencies. But yeah.
What would you say is the most successful grow that you have helped someone set up? Type and method of growing.
it was a female client that she reached out. She was a patient, and she had like migraines, and that was her main reasons. But she was a new consumer, and really a new grower. So, but she had a green thumb, and that's the beauty behind it. Because I ask a lot of people, I say, "Have you ever grown anything?" And about 50% of the time, it's like, no, I've never grown anything. And then it's like, okay, so we have to really learn the basics of just keeping plants alive. But she actually had a green thumb. She had a garden every year. So she decided that she wanted to take that into indoor growing. And she took all my instruction like to T, and she didn't really call me a lot. Because she kind of knew what to do. We set it up, got her set up. She had it was a 4x4 tent. She had 4 plants in there. And she just rocked it. And it was just a soil. It was organic soil, organic nutrients. And she figured it out really mainly on her own. A lot of it was like, and she would send me pictures of updates, and it would be like, wow, like this is pretty impressive. So yeah.
Sometimes all people need are the tools.
Exactly, because they have the skill set. It's just now the tools, the correct tools, and they put that skill set with those tools and make magic happen. And we all know how magical this plant is, right? So,
what would you say is the grow that you were most proud of having helped set up?
By far, the St. Louis Science Center. By far, I would say, just because that whole project, the way that was put together, and being a part of that, to say like to this day. I mean, it's amazing. Like I took my daughters there to see that exhibit, and it was just like, it just makes me like.
Tell me about the exhibit.
Yeah, so it's a hemp exhibit. So it's still cannabis, but it's hemp, and so they wanted to start to do. They were growing hemp outdoor. They did this the season before we did the indoor setup. So they were growing hemp outdoor, and they had a huge success with that. And they was like, well, we want to continue to do this. They were learning more about hemp and how it grows and what it can be used for. We have so many uses for this plant. And so they were like, well, we want to continue to do this year round, because if we're doing an outdoor, we have to shut it down in the wintertime. So they wanted to do an indoor setup. So the equipment was donated. It was multiple parties that was involved. I don't know all the parties. I know when I was contacted, they had already set up the equipment donation and all that kind of stuff. And I was there solely, where my company was there solely to set it up. So we set it up, and it was with Matt Holland from Bloom Medicinal. He was really the point of contact between us, like Elite Homegrowers Academy, and the St. Louis Science Center staff, because he was consulting them with the outdoor grow with the hemp. And so then he pulled us in to do more of the setup, and then the consulting for the indoor setup.
Dude, that is too cool. How big's the exhibit?
The exhibit is it's a 4x8 tent. And it's a decent size, like it's in their grow area within the St. Louis Science Center. But it's definitely a focal point. But they grow tomatoes. Well, they grow different like vegetables compared to how hemp grows. So right now they have hemp and peppers growing, side by side, to see, okay, how they grow, the rate of their growth, their yield, and things of that nature. But it's two sides of the tent. You have a hydroponic side of it, but then you also have an organic soil side of it. So it's like the perfect side by side of like organically grown hemp and peppers, and then hydroponically grown hemp and peppers, and the rate of growth. And you can like really see like the difference. And it's really cool to like experience like the yield on the hydroponic side always wins. Like the plants get huge. The yield on the peppers are always bigger. But you get to appreciate both sides of the equation, like the organic way that it's grown, and how it's just like, it's still beautiful within its own right. And
you said you took your daughter to this exhibit. Did you see other families there as well?
Oh yeah, it's all science, and so it's always kids running around and families, and they stopped. Like when we were there, it was 3 or 4 other families that were like waiting to look at the cannabis exhibit, and so I'm showing my daughter all this stuff, and they're probably looking at me like, how does this guy know all this stuff? But they don't know that I actually like helped set it up, and like I do this for a living. So, but that I would say that exhibit there, or that grow set up there, is one of the more special ones to me.
So you've got a new brand for yourself called Elitist.
Yeah,
How does
correct.
somebody go about starting a brand?
Wow. So the thing was, we were doing the Elite Homegrowers Academy, the nonprofit side of it, for since 2019, and we would always get asked like, we want to test your flower, we want to see some of your genetics, or we want to experience your style of growing, right? Our craft. And so that question kept popping up, and we grow pretty good cannabis, of course, and then so it's like, well, what? How can we further extend this? How can we open this up? And I felt like within the market, the industry now, we're to the point where I think creating a brand is important, especially in the cannabis field. If you want to show your work, if you didn't like, we didn't get a license, and we didn't get we didn't, so it's like, what's another way that we can actually be a part of this? So we created the Elitist brand. I had a t-shirt brand a while ago, so I knew how the merchandise side of things worked. And now I know how the cannabis side of things work when it comes to like breeding and having your own seeds and genetics and things of that nature. So I said, okay, we're going to fuse the two, and we're going to create things that we like, like we like density in our buds. We like frosty buds. We like buds that smell good, taste good, and most importantly, they work good. The effect. So we call it the 5-diamond scale rate, right? That's how we rate our genetics. So we'll say, okay, how many diamonds out of the 5 do this particular creation have? Oh, it only have 3 diamonds. It might smell good, may look good, or might be somewhat dense, but it may not have enough frost production. So you say, yeah, that's only 3 diamonds. We don't want it.
It's like the tools a baseball player has.
Exactly. So we really focus on 5-diamond genetics and the breeding process when we're creating things. So when we're pairing our males and our females together, what we want to create. And so that was the birth child of the Elitist brand. We were like, Elite Homegrowers, the Elitist. It just kind of, it just fit. It just made sense.
But since you weren't able to get a license, you still went ahead and created this brand. Does this mean you're looking to license your brand out to registered growers?
Exactly. So that's exactly what's happening. So, we're creating, well, we have created a brand, and we have our branded genetics, right? Our own name genetics and things of that nature. So how do we now take this particular product and get it to where in the hands of the world? What's the next step? And that's what I was thinking about. What's the next step? How do we make this creation go worldwide or nationwide? So,
but do you worry about, though, putting your genetics in somebody else's the hands of a grower that's not you? Because look at cookies. They're global. Yeah. I can't imagine every cookies grow is going to be the exact same like a McDonald's.
For sure. The bigger you get, or the more, expanded you become, the more watered down your brand becomes, unfortunately, because you can't be there for that expansion everywhere at all the time. So right now we're still small. We're still able to kind of pick and choose and select different cultivators that we want to work with, right? Mm-hmm. So on the commercial side, Bloom Medicinal, they're actually cultivating the melt strain that we created. But that's Matt Holland. He's the cultivation director there. He's my buddy, and he like helped me split up with the Science Center. So it was like, it just fit. And he's been rocking with us since the Elite Home Grower days. So he knows us as individuals, as businessmen. And so he stood behind us and said, hey, we'll run your genetics. And so they're running our genetics, and now that's kind of the crossover into the commercial world, where they're going to have our packaging, they're going to have our design, and like it's super exciting to me to know that very soon something that we created is going to have like shelf. It's actually going to be on a real dispensary shelf where patients can go get it and actually experience our work, like our craft and like our art form, and
like that's hearing your song on the radio that you created.
Man, it is. it like when we went down there to visit. And, the metric tag is the super important thing, how we track everything, right? When I seen the metric tag and it said melts, it was like, wow. Like it was like this huge load, just my shoulders just relaxed. Like I could breathe, because I felt like this whole time through the Elite Homegrowers Academy, running that and then creating the Elitist brand, and was like, sometimes you can get spinned around or lost in the sauce because it's just so much going on, and you can't be everywhere, and you have these goals and these ambitions, but sometimes things don't work out the way that you want it to work out. And it's like sometimes be pitfall after pitfall, a little success, another pitfall, a little more success, but just not giving up, right? Just saying, hey, we're locked in. This is what we're going to do. This is the ultimate goal. And then finally feeling like, hey, we reached it. Wow. Like, so, and that's where we're at. You
see the fruits of your labor. Now you just have to Do it again.
Do it again
And again,
and again and again and again. And one thing that I realized, I say like how it was a release of like, I feel like we met, like it was the race was over, but then it dawned on me very quick, like, no, it's a new race now, buddy. This is a new race. So now we're gearing up to run more, to run faster, you know, to get stronger. That's what I believe in. Like, we're here for a real reason, a real purpose. And I'm a hard worker, and I stand behind my work, and I'm excited to be here. And I'm gonna put everything, just like with the Elite Homegrowers Academy, as much effort and work that we put into that, building that name. We're gonna do the same thing with the Elitist brand, and super excited to be here and super happy to be here. You know, so yeah, I'm glad you asked that.
Well, you are definitely a busy man. I see here that you also have a full-time job for Camp Cannabis as their post-harvest manager.
Yeah, that is correct.
When do you have time for sleep?
Usually about 6 hours. I make some way I figure out a way to sleep, but it's
Take
a
me through the
grind.
post-production harvest. How does that begin? When do you step in?
Yeah, so we step in the day of harvest. That's when me and my crew, we're geared and we're ready. We go in and we help the flower team actually cut down all the plants, get them, racked up and get them into metric that they're chopped down, and we get them to the dry room. We get them all set up into the dry room. They stay there till they're dry, approximately 10 days, approximately in between there. And so we make sure we regulate their dry room throughout their process, because there's so many things that can happen, and how the humidity and the temperature like play a huge role in like curing your cannabis, or protecting your smell of your cannabis. So we monitor that pretty heavy. And then once it reaches that point where we say, okay, it's good to go, it's ready to trim. We shuck it first. We actually, unload the dry room. We take the plants down and we shuck them. We separate the buds from the actual stalk, and then we bag it up. We let it sit for about a good week, and then we start trimming it. We start trimming it down. And
You set it like on racks?
Oh no, it's actually we put it in like totes, like these totes that we have. We have totes, so we'll put them in bags, seal off the bag, put it in a tote, cap the tote, and then we put it in our vault. So it's really like a curing room. It's like the perfect temperature and humidity in that room for cannabis to cure. We let it sit back there for a week, and usually because we chop every 2 weeks, and it's a grind. Like, you got to be on it. So sometimes you can get backed up a little bit. So you're setting it for a week just because you have other stuff that you have to finish trimming before you can even move on to that next harvest. So it sits back there until we're able. We have the manpower, the time to actually get it trimmed. We start trimming it down and get it out the door, test it, package it when we get the orders in, and so get it set up and it leaves. And that's kind of where the job ends on my part. After the package leaves with the transportation company, that's my job is done.
And then you go back to the curing room to take out another batch and start it all over. How do you know when to take it out, though? Do you listen more to your gut, or do you listen more to the numbers?
It's I would say on the commercial side of it, and you're saying like from the cure, like when we start to actually trim it up, or like in the dry.
It's drying, it's curing.
Oh, okay,
You haven't shucked it yet.
Okay, so really it's a few different things. It's the strains, and if you're running multiple strains when you're chopping and you're hanging them in the same dry room, that can get a little squirrely, because now you may have a more chunkier bud versus a thinner bud, and they're gonna dry at different rates. So you have to float that room between like that sweet spot. You have to float it, and once you float it, you can kind of get it all to dry evenly, even though you have bigger buds versus smaller buds. So it varies. It's a lot of visual checking of it, and looking at your parameters, making sure your parameters stay the same, consistent overnight. Because once we leave, we really can't. Well, I can't regulate anything from home, so I have to really rely on how I set that room before I leave at night, and come back and just monitor it throughout the night, and just hope that we didn't, get too crazy. It didn't spike up, or it didn't go down crazy low. Because at the very beginning, you're worrying about decreasing the humidity, and it can be, fighting against you trying to just stay moist. So you want to try to drop that room into that sweet spot as fast as you can. And then midway through, the cannabis is drying more at a regular rate. Now you have to kind of slow down. Like, you don't want it to dry too fast now, because if it's too fast, you can jeopardize your smell, jeopardize a few different things. So
can you jeopardize cannabinoid and terpene percentages?
If you dry it too fast, I can't say that 100%. But I know it jeopardizes the smell of your cannabis, like the overall, like the finished product smell. It can. You ever smell cannabis that smell like hay? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
That's a bad cure.
that's a bad cure.
Okay.
It usually because it. Okay, so science wise, this is more like bro science and gut. I mean, just experience from doing it for so long. Cannabis has it kind of when it's drying, you have these different phases, right, based on the smell. So from day 1 to day 3, it's still gonna smell roughly how it smells like when it was coming from the room or when you chopped it. But around that day 3, you start to get that more chlorophyll. You can smell the plant starting to die. It's more chlorophyll starting to wick out, and it smell more like hay. So day 3, 4, 5, you're gonna get that hay smell. You can kind of expect that. But then around day 7, 8, 9, it start to turn back up. You can start to smell that more organic plant smell of that flower. But if your cannabis is dry, day 4, day 5, right when it's at that bottom of where it smells more like chlorophyll, it's gonna lock in right there, and you're stuck. Like,
And there's nothing you can do about it.
It's nothing you can. People say, oh, you can add orange pills. Like, it's a lot of home remedies that they say you can do, but or like legitimately, once you lose that smell, it ain't no coming back. It's gone. It's gone. Unfortunately, yeah, it's gone. So and with on the professional side, and even on the home grower side, everybody wants to smell. Like, when you smell your cannabis, you want to smell your cannabis. You want something that excites you, that makes you, like the taste buds kind of water. Like, this smells great. Versus like, oh, I missed the mark. I missed the mark, And I have growers sometimes, they'll have a jar of cannabis and they'll say, hey, Zach, what do you think of this? And they'll have me smell it. And it smells like hay. And they know that it smells like hay, but they won't tell me that they think it smells like hay. Then they'll see what I'm gonna say. And I'll say, well, it smells kind of like hay. How fast did you dry this? And they was like, well, I was smoking in day 5. And I was like, well, that's where the error lies, So, and then you start to break that down to them, and they understand, like, you don't always want to super fast. Like, I know we're all anxious and we want to like get to our medicine as soon as we can, or you have to let nature take its course. Like, you don't want to get in front of that, because if you do, now you jeopardize a lot, So just let that things happen organically. Let the plant dry out the way that it should, and then you will be a very happy smoker by the end of the process. So,
well, that's going to wrap up another episode of The Fields, folks. Once again, I have to thank Utopia Experience. Guys, this is an amazing set. You're probably sick of me hearing it by now, but thank you so much for allowing us to do this show here. Cannot wait to come back for season 4. Thank you to my episode sponsor today, Lush Labs. This Kansas City company makes some damn fine solventless products, people, if you ask me. They make live resin carts and cold cure batter. Now, I'm old school. Give me a bucket of ice, some fine flour, a couple of different size micron bags, and we're good to go. No school like the old school, folks. Check out Lush Labs. Thank you to today's clothing sponsor, Don't Triad Co. They're actually rebranding, so this shirt that I'm wearing is going to be a collector's item. If you want to get the last of Don't Triad Co. clothing, go down to Hustle City. That's HUSTL3C1T4. They're on South Taylor Street. Get it while the getting is good, because it's going to get gone soon. And finally, thank you to my guest, Zach Post. I'm very glad to have had the opportunity to speak with you, man. You dropped some serious knowledge for my viewers. Thank you so much.
Anytime you want to have me on, anytime I get an opportunity to drop knowledge or just hang out and talk cannabis, I'm with it. And appreciate you having me on. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome, man. And thank you to all of you out there for watching. We'll see you next time.